This is the BIPOC Fund info session. My name is Gloria. I am the staff member for this program. I am an immigrant to this country from Colombia, and we'll spend the next hour together. This session will be recorded, so you don't have to take notes. And the slides will also be posted online, as well as the application questions. There will also be a Q&A at the end. So hold on to your questions until the end, but submit them either that way through the Q&A, because some of your questions might be answered in the next hour. Or you can raise your hand if you want to say your question out loud at the end. So I want to begin our time together with an acknowledgement honoring all Indigenous people, especially the Wabanaki, who came here before us and nurtured this space as stewards of Mother Earth, the first people. Let's take a deep breath. And then I also want to share this quote from one of my favorite poets, Maya Angelou. She's also a justice activist, and she says, "The need for change bulldozed a road down the center of my mind." So I love the imagery of that. And this grant program funds organizations that are BIPOC-led and are leading the change needed to fix the inequities of this country and this state. There we go. So let me start with a little program overview. This program started in 2007, so about 16 years ago. I've worked with this program for about 3 years and was an advisor for the program before that. In 2020, the advisors changed the name to the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Fund. It used to be called the People of Color Fund. So racial equity is absolutely the goal. The max award, $10,000, and the application due date is coming right up, February 15th. And proposals are reviewed by a committee. I actually make no decisions. So you get a sense for the number of applicants. This is last year's numbers, 2022. We had 50 applications, so we get a robust number. And we granted 31 of those. Another part of our grant programs at Maine CF, we have many, is that donors get to fund proposals, which is kind of exciting, because then it allows more money for the committee to grant out. So we had 10 more grants funded by donors, and that program is called Giving Together. So each grant program at the Maine Community Foundation has its own, what we call criteria. Those are things that the organization needs to have in order to be eligible or counted and read by the advisors. So the criteria are specific to each grant program. So for the BIPOC Fund, number one, and most importantly, is that it involve Indigenous and/or people of color who are in leadership positions on board or staff of the organization, are involved in the design, delivery, and evaluation of programs or services. Also, that they are most of the participants or intended participants. So this will knock out a lot of white-led organizations that are serving BIPOC communities, but do not fear. If you do not qualify, if you do not meet this criteria, your organization can apply to our community building grant program, which is the same due date, February 15th, and has a separate application, but all that information is online. And that information session already happened, so you can see the recorded webinar there. A second criteria is that the organization or program increase racial equity, through improving access to resources, knowledge, or resilience of BIPOC people, or help BIPOC people overcome all the race-based barriers and disparities. Also, a criteria is that it uses, things around them, local resources. So it uses expertise of community. We really value community so that you're tapping into what is around you as a resource. We also have a couple fund priorities. Thanks to the Maine Health Access Foundation, we have some dedicated funds for programs that address health and the health disparities in Maine. So these grants will support organizations and projects that increase access to understanding of health or wellness. And health is defined very broadly in this context. So thank you to MIHA. Also priority given to leadership development. So organizations that provide skill building, training, mentorship for BIPOC people. Also priority to economic opportunities. So organizations that improve the economic well-being, such as increase to employment opportunities or job readiness, access to education, or professional, or business development. This grant program has two types of funding for project grants, new or expanding, and general support grants. So general support grants are best practice in grant making, and they're used for anything that the organization wants to use it for. So if an organization applies for a general support and receives it, they can use it for whatever the organization needs. So a project grant, on the other hand, is for a specific project that the organization is doing. So a new project are things that are happening for the first time or like in the first 2 years. So for example, a new project would be like creating a reentry program for people leaving prison, for example. Expanding that project would qualify after those 2 years, and that could be, adding a new service, adding something else that's helpful to the reentry program, or servicing a different geographic area, for example. So those are the two types of funding that this supports, this grant program. So I'm so excited that we offer general support grants. That this is, I think, the second year that it's been offered. And so the application, will read slightly differently because you're not pitching a project. So your total project budget, you'll enter the same amount as your request amount. So $10,000 is the max. Your one sentence proposal description would be your mission, and that one sentence proposal description is what gets posted in our Giving Together program with donors. So that's sort of the enticing words that would draw a donor in, that one sentence proposal description. And then for specific activities, you would list your ongoing programs that the funding could potentially sort of help continue to make them further exist. And for the proposal funding, you complete the budget description, but not the other sections. And again, it would just be $10,000. And next year, we'll make this easier. Joey told me that we can sort of branch the application. Ta-da, thank goodness. So we can make one branch for just the general support and one for the project. So you'll have specific questions for both. Thank you, Joey. Right. So there are some things that the BIPOC grant program cannot fund. And these are some, you know, they're for a variety of reasons. A lot of them are tax purposes because we're a public charity. So we cannot fund the things listed on the screens. Very important would be, you know, expenses that already happened, you know, so if you're pitching a project and the thing already happened, we can't fund that. So, but we can fund aspects of that project that happen afterwards. We can't fund for buildings or camperships, annual appeals, lobbying, etc. So don't ask for those things, please. So here is a little bit of a calendar of what actually happens. So February 15th, everyone will have submitted their proposal, and advisors read these proposals. Advisors will also provide a grant phone call to the contact listed in the application. Donors, grants, if they pick up the grant, those will go out as they are made. So they won't even wait until the decision meeting. So then staff review the proposals for the second and third week of February. And they do what we call due diligence. So making sure that all the tax ID stuff is correct. And then in March is when the advisors of this fund will review the proposals and make those phone calls. And I love that we make phone calls because it really brings a project to life. You know, sometimes what's written on the page is just not as vibrant as what somebody talking about it is. And we want to fund great projects and great organizations, not just well-written proposals. And then in April, we have a grant decision meeting. So the advisors get together. Actually, we have 2 days, 2 3-hour days of where we talk about the proposals and make decisions. And then in early May, the staff here start processing those decisions. This due date of February 15th has, I think, probably like 500 or more than 500 proposals coming into the foundation. So it's a lot. So it takes, you know, a couple weeks to process those. And then in mid-May, I think decisions are, I think we're doing email now, aren't we? Yeah, so that's wrong.
Yeah, you'll get it. Sorry to butt in. You'll get an email notification through the Apply platform, just a generic email. But then if you were granted through the program, you'll actually receive a paper copy of that and then additional information through the mail. Typically, it's about a week and a half after the email notification goes out.
Thank you, Joey. And also, I forgot to note that I have some lovely pictures from previous grantees on these slides, and they're noted there. That's Wabanaki Public Health. Okay. So here is a screenshot of what it actually looks like on our website. So everything is done online. We have no paper, no mailing, no paper. Everything's online on the computer. And that number 1 has the little button that you're going to press, log in. And then the number 2 has the online grant programs. And then the number 3 has you log in and you create, if you haven't already, with your email address, an account and a password. If you forget the password, no problem. You can reset it yourself. Okay. So some tips that people have found helpful. You know, we have a lot of organizations that have never written a grant before, which I love. So we definitely fund, you know, really good ideas from organizations that have not had a long history of getting funded from foundations. So you might want to think about not waiting until February 14th, you know, really giving it some thought a couple weeks in advance. And then that will allow time to have somebody else read what you wrote. I know that sometimes if I write something, I just, you know, I think it makes sense, but to somebody else reading it, you know, you might have questions. So it's often nice to have at least one person, sometimes two people, read the proposal over and then give you feedback, like this could be more clear, or what did you mean by that? So that is often very helpful. And I have noticed that advisors really fund proposals that look like they're really going to happen. So they put enough detail in the proposal that brings the project or the organization's work to life. So that could be, you know, a timeline, and it can be rough, you know, in July, we're going to create this or do this sort of outreach. So those sorts of details that make an advisor think this is really going to happen, or, you know, this is an organization that absolutely meets all the criteria and priorities, and we really want to fund this. So they're more likely to fund when something looks like it's really ready to go. Okay. All right. So that's it for the presentation, and we have a bunch of time for questions.
I guess I'll just start by, I'll read the one that came through in the actual Q&A. Okay. So can this fund a BIPOC-led and staffed healthcare for-profit business, not a 501c3 nonprofit?
Unfortunately, we can only fund nonprofits. So either a 501c3 or something that this foundation does, which I like a lot, is we will fund organizations that have a fiscal sponsor. So that means that the organization doesn't have their own tax ID number, but what they do have is a relationship with an organization that does have their tax ID number. And that organization is willing to accept the funds and work together to disperse the funds. So if an organization is using a fiscal sponsor, they need a board of at least 3 people who are unrelated, so not family members. So at least 3. And the fiscal sponsorship form is on our website. It's a 1-page thing. It just, you know, has a couple check boxes and signatures for both people, the organization and the fiscal sponsor. And we have a bunch of people do that, use a fiscal sponsor. It works pretty well. And you want to try to find a fiscal sponsor that doesn't take a lot of the money themselves.
So next question, can this fund a 501c4 or only a 501c3? I actually didn't know there was a 501c4.
Oh, that is such a good question. I will have to look into that. I think a C4, is that the lobbying one? Well, the answer is I don't know. So
I can actually unmute. It's Courtney raised her hand. Let me just unmute her quickly. All right.
But I can find out.
Yes. The only difference between a 501c4 and a 501c3 is that a 501c4 can do lobbying. I understand that the grant doesn't allow for that expense, but it can do everything else that a 501c3 does. It just adds a layer.
I believe we can only fund 501c3s, but I will double check. and I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Assuming we can get her contact information, Joey.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I have the list. I can get
okay.
that to you. All right. So the next one on the list: does political campaign include issue-based campaigns, e.g., raising minimum wage, or only electoral campaigns to elect a candidate?
Gosh, another good question. I believe it's I think it's broad, and we are, you know, we're, and again, this is a tax issue. I think the funds cannot be used for any sort of lobbying. So if it was to increase the minimum wage or the you know, for housing, you know, the funds of this grant program should not be used for lobbying for any reason. I'm sad to say, because it's super important work. But if that organization is doing lobbying of that sort, you can still ask the fund for other parts of your work or for general support. And then you get to choose what you're using the funds for.
All right. And obviously, if anyone has any follow-up questions about this or any comments, please just raise your hand in the chat and I can unmute you for that. But we'll go to the next question. Last year, we were funded through a DAF. Are we eligible for operating support?
Yes. Right, Joey?
Yeah, should be. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no limitations on regranting. There's no restrictions on regranting.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
We don't limit how many times people can get a grant with the BIPOC fund. People can apply every year. And I'll just say that I hope everybody on the call is also going to apply to community building grant program. Again, the same due date. It will be different application questions. But that one does not have as strict criteria, but does have criteria. So you'd want to make sure that you meet those. And the webinar for that, I think, already happened. So that's already posted on the website.
Yeah, I actually I shared the link for community building in the chat for anyone who needs it as well.
And that one's our county-based program. So you would apply to your county. And that, like this grant program, has a group of advisors that would read those proposals.
All right, next question. We are a caucus-based or caucus devoted to BIPOC and other marginalized communities. Would we be eligible through physical sponsorship? Or, oh, through fiscal. I'm assuming that was supposed to be fiscal sponsorship, excuse me.
So you're a caucus. So I think it has to be an organization. So, you know, an organization has a mission. It has some work that it has done, and it has a board. So as long, I think, as you have those things, and the fiscal sponsor, you know, remember it has to be at least 3 people who are unrelated to you on your board, then you could apply. I don't know if there's a follow-up for that, if I understood the question.
Yeah, Steve, please. Yeah, I will unmute you right now. Give me a second. Or I gave you permission to talk. You'll have to unmute yourself.
There we go. We originally looked at this grant. Our organization is Maine Recovery Advocacy Project, which is not specifically a BIPOC nonprofit. However, our caucus is strictly led by marginalized community members, BIPOC being a large. I'm actually the chair of that caucus. So would we qualify, or would we qualify under the community building grant, where Maine Recovery Advocacy Project isn't its own nonprofit?
You would definitely qualify for community building. The question for BIPOC is there leadership? that is BIPOC?
Yes, I am the deputy organizing director of Maine Recovery Advocacy Project.
Okay, so I would say yes. You know,
national chair under the parent company, which is National Recovery Advocacy Project.
You know, the advisors may read it differently, but I would say, you know, my focus is really on the leadership of that organization. And if it has leadership and is, yes, I would say, and meets those other three components of the of that criteria. So if they're mostly, if the programming is intended for BIPOC people, but the leadership is the big one for the advisors.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And for the next question, I think we kind of already touched on it, Sydney. It's if we applied, received a community building grant, is it possible to receive or possible to apply for BIPOC? The answer to that one is yes. Are there any restrictions,
yes.
Funding multiple years in a row? No. But obviously, if there's any follow-ups to that, please raise your hand. And that's the only ones we have in the actual Q&A. Does anyone else have any questions at this point?
Oh, Derek is asking the role of the advisors. Yes. So this is something else I like about this foundation is that staff, I don't get to pick, you know. Sometimes I think it would be nice, but I actually love that I don't make the decision. There are advisors, which are all BIPOC and represent different groups in the state, all over the state, and they are the ones making the decisions. I, you know, sort of train the advisors on what, a role of the advisors for the project. Oh, do you mean if you're a fiscal sponsorship, Derek?
Derek, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I meant the role of the advisors for the project. So yes, we are working with a fiscal sponsor, but we also have a panel of advisors who are giving us advice. And we're in the process now of trying to formulate how we engage them. So a little background might help. So in previous projects that I've had, I've formed an advisory panel that were kind of active in the beginning, mostly around the concept and project design. But once the project got rolling, it was sort of difficult to engage them. So right now, my collaborators and I are thinking of ways to either access a toolkit or formalize some sort of structure for their participation, whether that's a monthly meeting or a commitment to review our materials. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I think you answered your own question. I think those are great ideas, Derek, you know, to provide a little structure for them, you know, what they're assigned, to let them know, like, what does it mean to be an advisor to you, to your organization, to your work? So yeah, we meet monthly, check, you know, you review our materials, check, you know, I do not have a specific toolkit for that, but there are, you know, it's sort of, I mean, we could do a quick Google search, but I don't have a specific sort of toolkit for that. Okay.
All right. Doesn't look like we're getting any more questions at this point.
All right. Anything else you want to emphasize, Joey? Anything I forgot?
Not that I can think of. I think the questions about eligibility were the only, I guess the only ones that weren't, I guess, super clear in the slides. But other than that, I think we hit everything.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess the other piece of advice I would give is, you know, technology sometimes doesn't work, you know, so if you're, you know, trying to get into apply, you know, and something's not working, turn off your computer and turn it back on. And a lot of the times it'll start working. Don't know why. But if you still have problems, then reach out to us. And you are more likely to have technology issues if it's the day of the proposal due. So again, try to get it done before, so it gives staff here time to help you with any sort of questions that you have. And then one other grant program I hope you apply to if you are a BIPOC leader is Investing in Leaders of Color program, which is a September due date, and all kinds of information about that is on the website.
Looks like we have two questions that just came in. 3 questions. Can the advisors also be stakeholders? I guess that's a follow-up from Derek.
Advisors, I love advisors that are really engaged. Oh, your advisors, right? Not my advisor. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I would think so. That would be my opinion.
The next question, what is the campster that can't be funded?
Oh, camperships. So I guess at one point this fund was getting a lot of application from summer camps. So wanting to fund, you know, kids going to camp, to summer camp. You know, Maine has a lot of summer camps. So so this fund does not fund children going to summer camp. Was that clear?
All right, and yeah, so that one's cleared up. Do you have an LT goal to increase the amount of the grant application? I'm not sure specifically what that's referring to.
Does that person want to talk the question out? Because I'm not sure either. Oh, Claudette.
Hello.
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 Yeah, thank you so much, Gloria and Joe. So I was thinking because you see the amount of the grant, the 10,000, it's the maximum. And of course, I think the goal should be, how do you see increasing capacity of supporting our work and increasing the amount maybe long term?
Oh, the grant amount, so more than 10,000?
Yes.
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean that question is not up to me. And I think it's, you know, a lot of our grant programs together would have to be raised up, but right now I think the majority of our grant programs have a $10,000 max. Some are even a little bit lower, and ideally it would go up, you know, to take account for inflation and stuff like that. But that is not, we don't have any decisions on that now, but you know, there are conversations being had. But thank you for asking. I hope and I wish, but I'm not sure.
All right. Anybody else? Oh. Yep. Yes, Derek, applicants can receive funding from both.
Yes,
that is a possibility. Absolutely. So if you're eligible for both, please apply for both.
Yes. And and you can use parts from one application to the other application. They will be separate advisors reading community building and the BIPOC fund. So you can submit for similar things. Oh, it took me a second to read the question. General operating. So right now, it's one application. So when you're filling in for general operating, instead of like project activities, you'll have to flip that in your mind to say, and I think there is guidance in the proposal.
There is, yeah.
To say that, but it's one application. So you'll have, what you would put in is your organization's activities. And then next year, we'll have what Joey called a branch application. So we'll have two separate, it'll take you to different questions. Did that answer it, Andrea?
Did you see the follow-up question from Derek?
I think ideally what I would do, the question was, should we apply for different aspects of the different grants or submit the same grant for both? I would submit to different aspects of the same project because donors are also looking at this. And maybe a donor will pick up one piece of it more than another. You just never know. So I would, when I talk to folks like I am now, I'll say, if you can make it slightly different or ask for different parts of your project, I would do that.
Yeah, because it might highlight a different element that a donor might personally feel more involved with, and make it more likely that they would grant it. It wouldn't necessarily change the advisors reviewing as much, but to the consideration for the donors, that's definitely going to be best case scenario.
Yeah, so it gives you like two shots with the donors instead of one. And yeah. I'm very grateful that donor engagement staff here at the foundation have made raising money for this fund a priority. So we've been getting a lot of donations to this fund, which then will raise our grant budget, which is very exciting. So I guess this is related to Claudette's question, as our grant budget can increase, with further donations from our donors, then this fund can give more grants.
I think looks like we've wrapped on the questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for your time, and I'm available. My email's on the website. Feel free to reach out with any other questions, and please do apply to community building as well. And the staff person for that county will also be on the website. And I look forward to reading your proposals, and many thanks for your great community work.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.